thank you for attending this live stream of the League of Women Voters Community Conversation concerning the special election coming up May 5th. The election deals with the municipalization of the electric utility currently owned and operated by Black Hills Energy. I'm Ruth Nierenberg, president of the local League of Women Voters. First of all, let me thank those in the room and in the building today. We have Laura Gatz and Sandra Stutters doing timing. Laura is with San Isabel Electric and Sandra is with the 2030 Commission. On the technical aspect, we have Dwayne Nava and Mark D. Herrera of Goal High School. And we have our panelists here today. We have Steve Andrews, a retired energy consultant representing Bringing Power Home. We have Pueblo Mayor Nick Gradishar, and we have Randy Thurston, a former city council president who is quite well versed in this Black Hills Energy issue. One participant, Vance Crocker of Black Hills Energy, dropped out at the last minute because of the COVID-19 epidemic. We respect anyone's decision to do what they think is best in these times. The timing of this epidemic, the special election, and this conversation could not have been worse. Because it is still early in the epidemic and self-isolation and quarantines could last until nearly the election, we believe this is the safest way to get information to the voter. I'm sure everyone participating has been very careful up to this point, and we believe we are at minimal risk being gathered tonight. We are taking all possible safety precautions. We have Clorox wipes and hand sanitizer out for whoever. We have safe distancing. We're taking all possible safety precautions. There will be 5 questions. I will ask a different person to answer each question first. Everyone gets 3 minutes the first time around, and then 3 minutes to add any other point they might want to make. Going to start with the mayor. This is about financial considerations. How much will this cost, and where will the money come from? The Board of Waterworks has said it has $10 million to pay expenses related to municipalization. If this issue passes, could costs exceed expectations? And if so, how will the difference be funded?
Well, thanks, Ruth. Let me first thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this discussion this evening. As you indicated, this is an important issue, notwithstanding the fact that we're facing a pandemic. And it's an important issue because Pueblo has the highest electric rates on the Front Range of Colorado, and that's been hurtful to us. How much will it cost is set forth, I believe, in the Phase 2 study that was done by the consultant that was hired by the City of Pueblo. The distribution system, the entire distribution of Black Hills Energy was valued there at $334 million. And that was the highest value. Randy's been in the real estate business. He knows that, what appraisers do. They value things when people can't agree on them. So we had an appraisal done, basically, and others will be done as we move through this process, but the appraisal said $334 million for the distribution system. If we don't take the generating system, there will be some stranded cost to the tune of about $446 million. Another $88 million in startup costs, for a total cost of $868 million that it will cost the citizens of the City of Pueblo, we believe at the highest possible level. And it'll be paid for by the current rates, basically. At the current rates that we're paying now to Black Hills Energy, if we do nothing with those rates, there's enough excess capacity in those rates to pay off revenue bonds in the $900 million to $1 billion range over a 20-year period. So that's how much it'll cost. That's what it'll be paid for. If we can't agree with Black Hills about the cost will be determined by a Pueblo judge or a Pueblo jury after hearing from the various appraisers.
Okay, thank you. Same question about the financial considerations. How much will this cost and where will the money come from? And if it exceeds costs, what then? Mr. Thurston, you want to try that one?
I appreciate the mayor's numbers because he's going off a study. And as he indicated in the real estate business, there's 3 different ways of valuing. The value that I see as more of a legitimate concern is fair market, which is what a buyer's willing to buy and a seller's willing to sell. Black Hills was offered $1.1 billion by San Isabel Electric, and they turned it down. Is the court going to look at that, take that into consideration? who knows what the court's going to do? You know, the mayor mentioned about a local judge. You know, it's nice to have it local, but you're dealing with a corporation out of a different state. There is a chance it would go to a federal judge. And with a federal judge, it's an unknown. You know, if we're looking at, well, if we have a local judge, he's going to give us a special treatment, I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. So whoever is going to be the final decision maker, whether it's a state, local, or federal, the fair market is definitely something that needs to be looked at. The mayor also mentioned about the rate capacity, and I'm glad he mentioned that. He said with the current rates, there's enough to cover the $800 million. The people are all fired up about this because they want lower rates, not the same rates. And so I think that's a major issue that people need to realize, that the rates are not going to come down with the proposals that we're looking at. The chance of it going up is there, but as far as coming down, we're looking at current rates, and I feel that that's something that the public needs to know.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews, same question.
Okay. I would like to also echo my thanks to the League of Women Voters for holding this event during this time of great turmoil. It's much appreciated. The comments that Randy just made, let me comment on a couple of things. First, will rates be lower, or will they be the same, or will they be higher? A lot of this is going to depend on two things. One, the final tab that is agreed to, and two, the values of the community. We're going to bring this decision locally. If we move to a Board of Waterworks entity, we'll bring the decision-making process locally. And that means we have a choice. We can learn from the choices that others have made. Say, Kit Carson Rural Electric Cooperative south of us in northeast New Mexico. When they broke away 4 years ago, they had a choice, and they decided that they would rather pay off their loan sooner in a 10-year time frame than longer in a 20-year time frame. So they did not reduce rates much, but in 10 years, at the end of 10 years, or in 2026, their rates are projected to drop between 30 and 40%. So the communities can choose, to some degree, working with the Board of Waterworks, how fast this is paid off. And that in turn will have an impact on how rates will be set, and whether or not and for how long rates are. Perhaps stay the same to start with, and then either decline, or at least decline compared to what Black Hills would have charged. So there's those benefits. Well, benefits will accrue to the community, but it is hard to say exactly how they will accrue. The other thing I just want to stress is that when it comes to the costs, everyone focuses on that big number. I really want to focus on the benefits. There's a lot more discussion of costs than there is the benefits. And the benefits include local energy savings, local control, energy savings from more, perhaps a larger focus on what's called demand-side management, or saving energy, not just generating energy. There will be the opportunity to choose what sort of power source we want to be supplying us. There'll be the opportunity to design rates for all three customer classes, residential, commercial, and industrial. So there are a number of benefits that will accrue to the citizens of Pueblo if we vote yes, if we vote for 2A on May 5th. And let's not ignore those benefits when we talk about the pretty high cost number.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, you got anything else?
Yes, let me just say that there's no chance that a condemnation action filed over this would be tried in federal court. The state statutes and the franchise agreement that the city has with Black Hills Energy make it perfectly clear that if a condemnation action is commenced, it'll be tried in Pueblo County, Colorado. Now, that's not to suggest that a Pueblo judge is going to show favoritism or bias or anything like that, because they wouldn't. But there's not a single judge on this court, and there's not a single jury that we could pick in Pueblo County that I wouldn't trust to make a fair decision about what the value of the assets are that Black Hills is going to sell to the city of Pueblo. With respect to Black Hills' $1.1 billion offer, if this goes to condemnation, we're not buying a going concern. We're not buying a going business. What we're buying are assets. And those assets, if Black Hills wants going concern value, they should sell it to a willing buyer. But if we have to go through the condemnation process, I don't believe that's the value that an appraiser will use. They'll look at the formulas that appraisers use. The formula that was used here is the highest possible value. If we had to replace the system new today, less depreciation, not what Black Hills originally paid for it, but what if we had to pay for it brand new, subtract depreciation, that's the highest value of the appraisal methods that you can reach. That's the one we looked at in determining that it was feasible to go forward with this acquisition. So rates will come down eventually. They're not going to come down overnight, but they will come down eventually if we move to a public power system operated by the Board of Waterworks. The Board of Waterworks has the lowest water rates on the Front Range of Colorado and the best water supply system. And there's no reason why we can't do that with electricity either.
Okay. Mr. Thurston?
You know, if I can respond to Steve first when he talked about lessons learned. I'm all for lessons being learned. But after the fact, we're talking about an extremely costly lesson. First, it's a charter change. So it's not like when I was on council and we did a city enterprise and it was an ordinance and 2 years later they changed it at the vote of the city council. A charter change is serious. It's going to stay forever. So if we learn lessons like we shouldn't have done it like Boulder did, after the vote, that's not the time to learn the lessons. Let's look at what is a gamble and what is factual and then make the decisions off of that. 10 years from now, if it goes, and I use from 5 to 15 years only because Boulder has been doing it for 10 years and they have another 5. It could be 5 years, it could be 10. But if I look at 10 years out, who knows what the bond rates are? I mean, it's an interest rate. Right now, it'd be great with the cost of everything. But we're talking 10 years away. So when I talk about uncertainty and risk, it's not being negative. It's just saying that, if we waited 10 years and then all of a sudden the bond rates are 4 times what they are now and you're borrowing on $1 billion, there's no way you can predict that the rates are going to be something that's going to make the residents of this community happy.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, anything else?
Well, I agree that we don't know what interest rates will be in the future. We should acknowledge, however, that right now, through Black Hills Energy, we pay the note of a $350 million loan. It's in their paperwork that they file every year. On that $350 million loan, we pay a little over $18 million in interest. That's at a 5.2 interest rate. If we today or in the near future we're able to, if we vote to break away, the interest rate that we'll have access to over the next couple of years, based on what's going on with interest rates and what has happened recently, we should have a substantial savings there. If you had a 3.75% interest rate, you could save $5 million a year. That's a chunk. When it comes to, that's the entire service territory, but when it comes to Pueblo, that just small amount right there is a significant savings. There are many other savings that would be involved here, not just the interest rate. The largest single savings is from something called wholesale power purchases. And that is unlikely to change in the near term from being the substantial advantage it is today to anything less than a better or bigger advantage. Right now, we pay a very high rate for power from the Pueblo Airport generating station. About half the power that is sold to us by Black Hills is generated by their independent power producing station out there. It's not owned by Black Hills Energy. It's owned by a subsidiary of Black Hills Corporation. They sell it to us. They sell the power to us at a what I would call a Saks Fifth Avenue price. It's about $86 per megawatt hour. At the same time, most of the remaining power that they buy costs about $18 per megawatt hour. There are huge savings to be achieved through the purchase of wholesale power going forward. and that should not be underestimated. Not only that, it looks better in the future. In the future, we anticipate seeing fixed price contracts, such as Kit Carson Electric is getting for 10 to 20 years at a relatively low price, thanks to solar and renewable energy.
Okay, you mentioned assets, so we're going to talk about that next. And Mr. Thurston, I'd like for you to take this one first.
Okay.
If the citizens vote for this municipalization, there's going to be a lag time between the election day and the time that all the contracts are signed and all of the equipment has been taken over and all that. Say in July of this year, a car hits a power pole and the pole is damaged. And, of course, first the EMS comes and the police come, but then the power truck comes. What happens? Who is going to be responsible for maintaining that truck and that power pole in this time when the city doesn't have signed contracts and Black Hills knows they're going to lose them? Is this maintenance going to be done? And if so, by whom? We're talking, the truck, the tires, the oil changes, the equipment that fixes the pole itself, the safety equipment, and even perhaps the morale of the employees on the truck.
Well, Ruth, it's a great question, and it's something that I think will help clear up for everybody that's tuning in. There's a perception that on the date that the vote happens, whether it's yes or no, that it changes hands. It doesn't. And that's my argument too with the rates. The rates is not going to change hands until the condemnation is complete. And Boulder, again, using that as an example, is 10 years and they haven't started the condemnation yet, so that's why they're looking at another 5. Black Hills will maintain control until that point. So they'll be operating, there won't be a franchise agreement, but they'll still be paying franchise fees. So I want you to look at this, and the mayor has shared this in the fact that this isn't a short-term deal. We're talking a long-term deal. And so people aren't going to notice anything different in that immediate short term. But that's why we're talking 10 years from now, what are the rates going to be? Once the switch gets flipped, whether it's 10 years, 8 years, 15 years, then that's a whole different story. Then immediately the city will step in and they have to be up and ready to go. There was an interesting point that somebody made, and one of them is with the computer system. So the computer system is tied in with Black Hills all the way through the network and up to South Dakota. Excel just purchased a computer system because cyber security is a huge thing. I mean, we're not talking dollars, we're talking billions. I mean, this is a big thing. They spent over $500 million on a new computer system. And it's worth it because cybersecurity is one of the most important things that we have, and people that want to hack it look for a weak system. Right now, Black Hills has a good system, Excel has a good system. So what happens when that system gets pulled out and the city now is in charge? The question then with billing. A brand new computer system gets put in, you have to tie into the smart meters, you have to do all of these types of things, and all of a sudden in 30 days, it's not up and going, which chances are, I was told that's not going to happen. You're looking at 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months. Well, what happens with those utility bills during that length of time? They don't get paid, and then you're looking at something that becomes a hardship on commercial, on residential, on everybody along those lines. But for the initial period while we're going through the legal and the condemnation, you're not going to see a difference from what it is right now, Ruth.
Okay. Let's go to Mr. Andrews next about the assets and maintenance of the assets in the interim. And if you want to talk about the computers, please do.
Sure. Let me address both of those. Black Hills is a regulated monopoly. The regulation occurs in Denver, and it's through the Colorado Public Utilities Commission. Before Black Hills took over, and by the way, there have been 5 takeovers of this service territory in the last 6 decades. So this has happened before, and it can happen again. Before Black Hills took over, they had to apply to the Public Utilities Commission to get something called a CPCN. That stands for Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. The CPCN is essentially your driver's license for the utility. You get it and you get to run it. And you have to prove that you're up and ready to operate it. And not only that, once you accept your CPCN is granted, you must continue to operate it until the next utility is fully ready to take over. That's an obligation, regardless of what your franchise agreement is with the entity. You must continue to provide service. In fact, up in Boulder, they assigned extra people there to Boulder to try to not only maintain, but if not upgrade the service, to try to win the hearts and minds of Boulder and try to keep them from breaking away. I don't know how that's working, but that was in fact a reality. Randy mentioned a $500 million computer-based system. There's something called a SCADA, and we won't go into what that stands for, but it's the computer system located in South Dakota that runs everything around here. Knows where all the poles are, the transformers, everything. And it does not cost $500 million. It costs, according to an estimator here in town, it costs $3 to $4 million. So let's not get too scared about that. That would be part of the purchase cost, no question about it, but it would not be an enormous new cost that we haven't heard about. It's just part of the transaction going forward. I would just add that during the last 40 years, there have been 40 successful breakaways of utilities from public power entities created that have broken away from their former investor-owned utilities. And most of them did not take 10 years. Boulder is the exception that does not prove the rule. I do not expect anything like the 10-year time frame. In fact, there have been a number of breakaways that have been achieved in a 2 to 5 year time frame in the case studies that I've done for our group.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, same question. What about the assets in the interim?
Well, Randy's correct that the franchise agreement makes it very clear that Black Hills Energy has to continue delivering energy to the citizens of the city of Pueblo and the entire distribution territory until another public power provider is in place and the city of Pueblo notifies them that another power provider is in place. So there's no issue there. The Board of Waterworks estimates that it will take 5 to 8 years to accomplish this process if Black Hills resists. Now, obviously, if Black Hills comes to their senses and says, you know, we'd like to receive going concern value, so let's negotiate a deal after the voters vote, it could be done a lot quicker. So it's not going to take 10 or 15 years. We've learned from the mistakes that Boulder made. Boulder has been through 5 municipal elections, as Steve said, over this issue. And some would have tried to put us in the same spot by saying, okay, let's put on the ballot a limit about how much you can spend. Let's put a limit on how much we can pay. And then obviously that gives Black Hills Energy a target to shoot for. As soon as they get to that target, then, oh boy, you got to stop, you got to go back to the voters, and it's delayed over and over and over again. So we've learned from some of the mistakes that Boulder made, and I think our process will be much smoother there. It's inconceivable to me that there will be a 5 or 6 month transition period when this happens and that bills won't, will not go out, or that the utility will not have money coming in. That's just inconceivable. I'm sure that Black Hills would like everybody to believe that this is going to be as difficult as possible. And make no mistake about it, it's a complicated process, but it is a process that we can work through and that we can accomplish. And at the end of the process, no matter what Black Hills wants, we're going to end up with their assets. We're going to end up with their assets unless we just throw in the towel.
I would like to respond with Steve when he talked. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is that fair enough? With the $3 to $4 million computer system, it's like anything. You can go to Walmart and you can buy something cheap at a cheaper price. The point that he was making from Excel was, we live in an age that cybersecurity is a new game, and the bad guys would love to knock down a system for 2 weeks to 2 months to whatever, and they're looking for the weak $3 to $4 million bargain computer system. And I'm not saying that wouldn't work, but I'm just saying right now, the grid that we're operating under is in the top 25% with security and reliability. We can cheapen everything and make the numbers work and drop rates and do all this, but what I understand that people want is the lowest rates. They want the highest quality and the most dependable. You're not going to bargain cheap price all of this stuff, and if we do, we're going to have the grid and the system looking like our roads. Our roads right now in Pueblo is the same thing as the grid for the power. It has to be a priority, and governments, and Nick knows, everybody knows that I have a hard time with municipal government-owned things. Government is a necessary evil. It's for the people, by the people, and I support that. But all of a sudden you start having political pressure and you start having contracts let it out to people that are somebody's friend that might not be the best. And all of a sudden you have pressure for another direction. And before you know it, you have roads that aren't getting funded because somebody's got pet projects that are getting funded. You don't have that with an investor-owned utility. Political pressure, political influences, that is a huge element, and to tie that in with utilities that we depend on to make sure that we can flip the switch and the lights come on and we don't have to worry about getting hacked by a foreign country that's going to put us in the dark. We can say all day long that, well, it probably ain't going to happen, or Randy, you're over-exaggerating. No, I'm being realistic of the things that we need to be looking at now, not after the vote takes place. So based off of that, I really think we can talk cheap numbers. We can talk numbers that will keep us in the best safety and position of knowing that lights will come on, and that's going to be up to the people when they vote, whether they want to cheapen it or they want to keep it first class.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Andrews, got another comment?
Yep. Yes. Nationwide, there are over 2,000 public power entities. There are a lot more than there are investor-owned utilities. They serve about 15% of the population. Many of these entities are fairly small. Some of them are large. Sacramento, Los Angeles, Austin, a number of places around the country, Long Island Power Authority, you name it. There are a lot of large public power entities. When you add them all up, their reliability factor is higher than the investor-owned utilities that Randy is lauding. Yes, Black Hills is in the top 25%, but nationally, investor-owned utilities are not as good as public power entities. That's because public power entities can focus in a smaller area and dedicate their services. They know their services well, they know their customers well, and the relationship has been more than reliable at the national level. As for regulated, the government entities that Randy is fearful of, keep in mind that we are regulated by a government entity, and the game is more or less rigged up in Denver in favor of the utilities. Anyone who doesn't feel that's the case should just has to look at the rates. There were deals that could have been struck between Black Hills when they first took over and Xcel Energy that were not struck. The result was the building of some natural gas-fired power plants at the Pueblo Airport generating station that definitely favored shareholders over customer interests. So that's a key difference between investor-owned utilities, nicknamed IOUs, and the public power sector, where their only interest is in the customers they serve, not the shareholders who keep them running, who've invested in them. So I would say that that's a bugaboo I'm not at all concerned about. I like the fact that I would be able to elect my representatives for the electric power system, rather than having to go up to Denver to try to work through the Public Utilities Commission, where I personally cannot have standing in order to affect rates coming down the road from as mandated from South Dakota and Denver. I just think that the deal is much more in favor of the customer when it's public power than it is when it's the investor-owned utility model.
Thank you.
I just want to make a couple of responses to Randy's. Randy, you know that the City of Pueblo and the Board of Waterworks, as public entities, grant contracts through competitive bids.
Correct.
They don't give their bids to their friends. Who gives their bids to their friends is Black Hills Energy. And if you doubt that, take a look at the power purchase agreement entered into between Black Hills Energy and the Pueblo Airport Generating Station, which we have to live with until 2031. So they make a sweetheart deal to charge us more for power than you could buy on the open market. So that's the investor-owned utility model. That's where you ought to be concerned about sweetheart deals and somebody's buddy getting a contract. That's exactly what happened to this community and why the price of power we're paying is the highest on the Front Range. So it's a false choice to say that if we want a good system, we have to stay with Black Hills Energy. That's a false choice. That's not true. The Board of Waterworks has an outstanding water system. They have a SCADA system, just like Black Hills Energy does, that controls the delivery of water to our homes. So when we turn on the tap, we get water coming out of it. So it's not any less complicated than the electric system. And they've operated it since at least 1954 in an outstanding fashion. So.
Yeah, and I want to commend the Board of Waterworks because we have one of the best utilities there with the Board of Waterworks. Alan Hamill, Seth, they've done phenomenal, so I'm not doubting that. But I'm going to disagree on some of those things, but I want to go back with Steve first when he talked about...
We need to move on to the next question.
Okay, can I just answer this, about the
30 seconds.
Okay, he said about 2,000 small municipal-owned, those average 9,000 population. And 74% are investor-owned across the country. And those are for the larger situations there. So I just want to make a strong clarification that 74% is investor-owned, not municipal-owned.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to some projects that may remain undone. Black Hills plans to add 200 megawatts of renewable energy to the grid by 2022. This would help with the city's stated goal of complete renewable energy. What happens to that project and also to the power line being run through Pueblo West to serve Canyon City, our friends and neighbors who also need some electric power? Will the Board of Waterworks take these projects on, and if so, how? Let's start with Mr. Andrews, since you have some consulting experience.
Well, no one can say for sure. My assumption is that if the people vote yes on 4A, if they vote for 4A on May 5th.
2A.
Sorry, 2A. Thank you. If they vote for 2A on May 5th, that a number of the deals that Black Hills has on the table will be withdrawn. The transmission line that you mentioned that goes up through Penrose to Canyon City to improve reliability up there, it's about a $40 million, $35 million project that has been approved by the Public Utilities Commission a while ago. That may or may not go forward. It's facing a lot of resistance from customers along the way who do not want the arrangement as it's been laid out to them, running across their properties and so on. So that one is moving forward slowly, but in a bumpy sort of way, with a lot of resistance. The large solar deal, solar, wind, and battery storage deal that Black Hills has put out for bid or solicited bids for, I should say. I think that that will be immediately put on hold, but I can't say for sure. Black Hills may be proceeding from today with the assumption that they're going to win this battle, and therefore they want to pursue this solar, wind, and battery system and investment, and they may go forward. I really shouldn't and can't speak for them. I wish Mr. Crocker were here to answer that question himself. Hope that helps.
Okay. Thank you. I wish you were here too. So I guess you got to take it. So.
Well, and that's fine. I just want to say that an investor-owned utility will always be upgrading. They'll always be looking at the new future of the technology. They'll be looking at the changing market. So what we're talking about today and going in and buying Black Hills twice, having paid for it and then buying it again, we're going to be in a whole different ballgame 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I mean, look at the automation what you can put in your house to save energy. Look at the rooftop solar that is being put up. Now, I'm going to tell you this, that from what I understand in my research, that Black Hills revenue has dropped 10% over the last 10 years because of rooftop solar. And they're fine with that. But when you have a city budget and you have everything looking this direction, are they going to be supportive of the rooftop? Are they going to be supportive of creating the future technology, the greatest ways of how we can really save in the future? So it's nice to have the commitment and the focus of the future. Because just like right now, where we're at today, I guarantee you 5 years from now, if we're having this conversation, we'd be talking about a whole different set of projects than what's being talked about now. So I think we need to look at the future and what's going to give the best rates, the highest quality, and the most reliability, as always, as a commitment and focus for this community.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Well, the idea that an investor-owned utility will always be updating, yeah, because that's how they make money. They make money by buying stuff. They borrow money at 6% or whatever it is, and the PUC allows them a return on that of 8 or 9%. So that's how they make money, is by spending money. And we end up paying that VIG, if you will, the difference between what they borrow the money for and what the PUC allows them to return there. I can't tell whether Black Hills would abandon that 200 megawatt solar project or not. I hope they wouldn't, because it's clear that the citizens of Pueblo want to have more renewable energy. The Phase 2 study and the cost estimates there are based on a 70% renewable energy portfolio. So if Black Hills gets their 200 megawatt renewable plan, they'll be at about 60 or 65% is the numbers I read. So they'll still be below what our analysts suggested you could have in your portfolio in terms of renewable energy. And I frankly don't know the ins and outs of rooftop solar, but I've talked to a lot of people. A lot of people are involved in this campaign for municipalization that are not very happy with Black Hills and how they've treated the solar owners. These are rooftop solar owners that are very, very active in saying, hey, we need to municipalize this. And I suspect that's not because Black Hills has treated them well.
Did I respond?
Yeah, let's go with him and
Okay.
and then you.
Randy just said that revenues dropped 10% due to solar investments. That's just flat out not true. I'm looking at the the extensive document that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission requires be filed by utilities annually in April. The one that was filed in last April by Black Hills shows that their total electric operating revenues in 2018 were $250 million and change. Their total the same figure for the year prior was 249. Let's round it to 250 million. It was level. There has not been a 10% drop in gross revenues. That, in fact, is their high looking back between now and when they took over. When they took over, their gross revenues in their first year were $158 million. So their gross revenues have increased well over 57, 58% in the time that they've been here. Their number of customers is, because of those increases that they've passed along, their number of customers the growth has been very small. The number of industrial customers when they took over the system was 94. Now it's around 60. The commercial customers that they had were around 11,000, and they're about 11,000 now. That's over a 10-year period. They've grown up 0.6%. So their large revenues have not been recently hit by solar. What's been hit was the solar industry, and also buyers of solar, especially in the commercial sector, were hit hard when the rates were changed back in 2013, 2014. Those rates were changed to the disadvantage of any commercial customer who invested in solar energy. And so they'd made the investment. The assumption was A, the payoff was going to be A. They ended up having to deal with a payoff that was according to Plan B, and it made it much worse for those customers. So that kind of rate changes that were instituted by Black Hills large changes that are like big swerves on a black ice road, big turning of the steering wheel. You don't have to do that when you have local power. You can make small tweaks and less over a shorter period of time rather than making large changes every 3 or 4 years, as is currently the case up at the Public Utilities Commission through the regulated process.
Okay, let me ask you a question here. First of all, I feel like you're kind of ganged up on 2 to 1,
and
and
I'm
you only
fine.
get one
Well,
rebuttal. Do you want me to go ahead and have him speak his second piece, and then you get like maybe 4 minutes to respond to everybody? Is that good?
If I can make enough notes to keep track of everything. We're all struggling with this.
Sure,
But go
and
ahead. That's
we'll
fine.
give you extra time.
Okay.
Okay? What else would you have to say about these projects?
Well, I think I've said what I would about the projects. I mean, I think the Pueblo Board of Waterworks and the surrounding communities, if they end up taking that distribution system, would all be interested in a renewable energy portfolio, because the Phase 2 study commissioned by the City of Pueblo proves that that's the cheapest form of energy available. And as Steve indicated, those energy companies are willing to lock the price of that energy into long-term contracts. So you have a 10-year contract for energy at a certain price, or a 20-year contract. And think about it. Solar or renewable doesn't depend on the price of any natural resources like coal or natural gas. Once you have that renewable field in, the costs to operate it are not nearly what they are for any other kind of generating system, so.
Okay.
You know, in response to Steve, and, you know, I'm obviously not trying to go back and argue, but I'm going to say, numbers can say whatever you want them to say. I'm going to tell you this, that Black Hills, when they built that new power plant, it was, I think, $550 million. They had a big cost that shot the rates up. Then if you look at the graph, you can see from 2012 to 2019, you can see where the rates actually are $1 less than they were back in 2012. And that shot of rate increase was because they made a major investment. Now, they made that major investment because of XL. XL decided when they built Comanche 3 that they could make more money up in Boulder and Denver. So they made a business decision. And again, it should have been something that we on council forced that issue. We didn't even know that was available at the time. So now here's where we're at. We got Black Hills, they came in, they built a state-of-the-art. I think even in the study it says it's a state-of-the-art. It's about as good as you can get for a natural gas plant. They have 0 coal. There's not any coal that they burn, it's all natural gas. Tri-State, who furnishes San Isabel Electric, I think they're at 40 or 50% coal. You got Colorado Springs. They've got a coal generation that they're going to have to re-gear up and everything along those lines. What's going to end up happening is those rates are going to have to go up when they start backloading with the natural gas. And if you want to live in a world where you buy off the market and that's your only source, it's great now. But what happens when that market goes up and rates shoot through the roof? So with us having, and again, with the mayor, if this happens to pass, I would highly recommend that you take on and take that natural gas plant, because it gives us a dual situation. We can buy off the market when it's the cheapest, and when the rates go up, then we can produce our own energy. So those are things that, again, it's so complicated, but to sit there and just throw numbers out and say, Mr. Thurston, you're wrong because this says this, isn't something that I'm going to do with either one of these gentlemen. It's something that we need to really be respectful and realize that this is about informing the public, not confusing them with stats you can pull from different areas there.
Well,
Go ahead.
but when you say the rates, that they've lost 10% of the revenue because
Correct.
of solar, and that's not true.
Well,
That's
not true.
that's the forms they file with the Fed. So Randy, you have to live with the numbers. You don't just make the numbers up.
and I'm not making
Okay,
numbers up.
let's move on here to something. Maybe we can agree on this one. This is about corporate citizenship. Black Hills has been fairly responsive to criticisms concerning cutoffs, and has become a better corporate citizen since criticisms were taken to the PUC several years ago. If the ballot issue fails and Black Hills is allowed to remain, what assurance do citizens have that they will remain a responsible corporate citizen? Mr. Thurston, you want to take that first?
Well, again, I'm going to pull some numbers out now.
Okay.
And when we talk about the shut-off rates, we talk about collections, we talk about policies. I have the Black Hills, and I also have the Pueblo Board of Waterworks. I have the greatest respect for the Pueblo Board of Waterworks, but they actually turn people's water off quicker than people get the electric turned off by 3 days. The actual numbers of the shutoffs for Pueblo Board of Waterworks in 2018 was 9.6%, and for Black Hills it was 7.04%. So again, when you have a perception that everybody's saying Black Hills is terrible, and I'm not for or against Black Hills. I'm for what's best with that situation, but these are actual rates right here in front of me.
What do you mean you're not for or against Black Hills?
No, I am not. Okay, no.
What are we doing here then?
Okay. Okay,
the
I
issue
still
is-
have some time, so I'm going to respond.
Okay.
I am not for or against Black Hills. I am for the citizens of Pueblo that they can make an informed choice. This is not a political battle. This is serious stuff. And when I look at what the ballot issue says that was put out there, there is no protection for the citizens, the ratepayers of Pueblo. It was written to benefit Black Hills, the city, and the administration. It was not, and it's right here in front of me. So I'm here to say I support roof-type solar. I support green energy. I support those kinds of things. But I don't support the city taking over. I don't support having this illusion that if we turn it over to them, it's all going to be rosy. Right now, the Board of Waterworks, if you don't pay their bill, they can lien you. They lien you. If you don't cut your weeds, they lien you. If you're a government municipality, you can do those things. An investor-owned utility cannot lien a property. So when you talk about corporate citizenship, I think you need to look at both sides of that coin there.
Mayor Gradisar, I almost hate to let you talk, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to address the cutoff period, because I had something to do with that. When I got elected to the Board of Waterworks, the charitable organizations in this community came to me and the other newly elected member of the Board of Waterworks and said, at that time we had very lenient shut-off policies. People could go for 60 or 75 days. They came to us and said, don't let them do that. Because when you do that, you cut them off, the amount to get that water turned back on is so much. So, you know, if they're turning them off 3 days quicker than Black Hills, you know, I say that's fine. There's no problem with that at all. But when we did that, when we changed that policy, we also established a CARES program. That is a program that we pay to United Way and Catholic Charities so that they can help people who get their water shut off. I think it's funded now at $117,000 a year, the Board of Waterworks pays. What Black Hills was willing to do in the agreement that we were talking about with them was they were going to put in $40,000 a year for a CARES program. So in terms of which will be the better corporate citizen, I suggest to you that the board that's locally elected by the citizens of this community will be the better corporate citizen rather than the board that's in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Andrews, if the ballot issue fails and Black Hills is allowed to remain, what assurance do citizens have that they will be a responsible corporate citizen?
They don't have any assurance. First, I want to go back to the point that the mayor made about back in 2011. I talked recently with some people with dealing with affordable housing and housing support and the homeless and so on. And in 2011, they approached both entities, Black Hills and the Water Board. And they, in both cases, they needed relief. And the reception they got in 2011 was markedly different. The Water Board worked with them and came up with a plan. Black Hills did not. They kept on, the pressure kept building, the problems kept growing. And eventually, back in 2016, when the Public Utilities Commission came down here, they got an earful. They got 500 citizens showing up at a PUC commission meeting held here with 50 people testifying, 47% bellowing against Black Hills. So after that, another year later down the road, the city council voted 7-0 in September to study their alternatives. Before that vote, we had tried to work with Black Hills in what we called our own Plan A better Black Hills. it didn't work. We had numerous meetings with Chris Burke and the executive director of or vice president of operations in charge here, and we were making a little progress, but very little. It was only after the 7-0 vote that 6 and 7 months later that Black Hills rolled out what I called their charm offensive, in which they tried to remake their image in the community. And they've invested more, they've made more donations, and they've made, done more advertising, a lot more advertising. But there is no guarantee that when the vote happens in May 5th of this year, that if that vote is 4-2A to break away, that they will remain the corporate citizen that they have morphed into, which is somewhat better than the corporate citizen they were back in 2011. I would also mention that Randy talks about the city taking over. This is the Board of Waterworks, run by an elected board. If we have a problem, we can go down to the Board of Waterworks, which I intend to do, to verify that my voice will be heard as a customer of Black Hills if this transition moves forward. I'm not going to drive to South Dakota, and I've rarely participated in Denver at the Public Utilities Commission, so I feel I'll be much more involved.
Okay, Mr. Thurston, you want to try that one again?
Sure.
About corporate citizenship?
You know, I think when I look at corporate citizenship, you have to look at the complete picture. And right now, again, the rumor or the reputation or the indications and everything is Black Hills is the evil, they're terrible, they don't do anything, we'd be better off to do whatever we want to do. My stance has been that the worst thing we could ever do is to turn this over to government and municipalities, just because I understand how that goes. So when I look at what Black Hills had offered, they offered 5 years of no rate increases. And we're already now talking about that if the mayor had his plan going forward, you know, it's going to be 7-8 years before we have to then fund with the bonds to purchase of Black Hills at $1 billion. Well, if you take the cost of the power and you throw that $1 billion over 20 years, how can you sit there and say that the rates aren't just going to be out of control? It's a gamble and it's a risk. And I'm going to tell you one thing right now that I'm passionate about. Government is not in the business of making gambles. And this is a gamble. The mayor even said there's risk involved, but it's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. No, you don't gamble with taxpayers' dollars. And it's easy for taxpayers' dollars because it's not your money.
There are no taxpayers' dollars.
Okay.
There are no taxpayers' dollars in this proposal.
Okay.
I know Black Hills says that, and that's what their advertisements say, but there's no taxpayer dollars involved here.
When we go over the actual ballot question, we can get into those details. So I'm just going to say very clearly that this is something that an offer was made to keep the rates solid. They've also been a corporate partner in job creation. Job creation is the thing that's really going to balance us out. If we were growing responsibly over the past and we were at 150,000 population, I guarantee you our roads would be in good shape. I guarantee our property taxes would be lower, and I guarantee our utility rates would be lower. We have 47,000 people paying utilities. Colorado Springs has 255,000 people paying utilities. So again, this is something that it's not about blaming and making somebody the evil giant so we can sit there and look good at it. It's like we have a corporate partner here that says we'll invest $200 million in job creation. That's not something to sneeze about. So I think when it comes to corporate partnership, we need to have an open mind and not drink the Kool-Aid that this is an evil entity that we can't wait to get rid of and turn it over to the city that's going to just protect us. Even though they're gambling with our money, they're going to protect us, and we just need to trust them that there's no risk. Everything's going to be fine. Someday the rates will come down. The people right now in Pueblo are expecting rates to come down as soon as this takes place with the vote, and that's unfair to those citizens.
Okay.
Can I, is that?
You can go next.
All right. So they never offered $200 million for job creation. They never offered $200 million. They offered to invest $200 million in their system that they would add on to our bills. They did offer that
And there's jobs that are created with that.
Well, over the course of the system, yeah, we were going to pay for that. We
Okay,
were going to pay that
but
$200 million.
there were
They
jobs
weren't.
that are created.
And they did offer 5 years of no rate increases. They were willing to freeze our rates at the highest level on the Front Range for another 5 years. That's what they were willing to do.
Okay. Mr. Andrews?
Randy talks about a gamble. Let's talk about public power, or at least moving away from investor-owned utility and the mecca of gambling, and that's Las Vegas. A major breakaway occurred during about 3 years ago. 3 large groups of casinos, MGM Resorts, Wynn Resorts, and Caesars Entertainment, which totals 24 casinos. They all left Nevada Power 3 years ago. That's the investor-owned utility in Nevada. Their combined electricity demand and electricity usage exceeds those of Pueblo and Pueblo County combined. The casinos separated because they wanted to increase their investment in renewable energy, and they wanted to save money. When I contacted a key individual with MGM Resorts early this month, he stated that we are, quote, "We are very happy with the financial results of the deal we made to leave Nevada Power," end quote. So the bottom line in Las Vegas, which is the center of gambling in the nation, is that they didn't view their breakaway as a gamble. They viewed it as a wise financial move that gives them more control over one of their largest expenses. Same thing can and should happen here if we vote to break away. In terms of corporate partner and job creation, I point to AX2. AX2 was a project that was hyped by Black Hills conveniently just before a city council vote back in 2018. And essentially, it was out of whole cloth. This organization based in Denver, in a basement in Denver, was going to come up with a $100 million building south of town. They made a small investment in some land, a small down payment on some land. That project never proceeded, didn't look like it had any chance of proceeding, especially once Mr. Crocker was grilled by the Public Utilities Commission back in April of last year. That was a no-hoper. If that's the kind of investment that was supposed to produce 50 to 100 jobs in a data management center, I wouldn't want to bet on future investments where they're a key partner. It just did not work out well. It seemed to me like it was a head fake. I can't prove it, but it certainly wasn't something that ended up with a concrete benefit to the community.
Can I say something?
Quickly.
Okay, yeah, I want to disagree with Steve on AX2. I supported Black Hills' application in the Public Utilities Commission to get that economic development rate for AX2 because I thought that would be good for this community. But what that entire process showed me is that's why we need to municipalize, because they were not able to get an economic development rate for that company, let alone a general economic development rate that they were trying to do through the Public Utilities Company, through the Public Utilities Commission, and you can do that when you have a local board that controls that. You can have almost an immediate decision on an economic development prospect or an economic development rate. So they haven't helped our economic development because the industrial and the commercial rates here are just as high as the residential, the highest on the Front Range.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more questions. One has come in over Facebook. I'm going to go ahead and ask that one first, and I think we'll just, because I have my little system here, we'll just start with Mr. Andrews and go that way rather than going through my little system. The question from Facebook is, how would the public power option affect jobs and the economy locally?
I think it would be a positive development. I think it would take time, but by and large, a few jobs will be brought back that are elsewhere. Call centers, customer service, those sorts of jobs would stay here. A big factor is that a lot of dollars that go out of state that go to South Dakota. You know, we send $120 million worth of electric bills, payments for our electric bills to South Dakota. A bunch of that comes back, but some of it doesn't. That process would end. A substantial portion probably in the neighborhood of $20 million a year. Hard to say, could be up, could be down from that. It's arguable, but a lot of that money would stay here that currently leaves. We wouldn't be supporting, the construction of a $70 million headquarters up there. There's a number of things like investment, payments for federal income tax, a number of things like that that are avoided. Legal fees would go down substantially. All of that money can then go back into stay in the economy and create more jobs. In particular, the manufacturing sector, if they had a break on their rates, could expand locally. It's been really hard, obviously, from the number of accounts where we've gone from 94 industrial customers to 60 over the last decade. It's hard to attract industrial customers here. If rates were more reasonable, we would be able to have more jobs. I just toured a couple of manufacturing plants the other day where a group of manufacturers is coalescing to raise their objections to Black Hills and their support for the 2A ballot initiative, or ballot amendment. So I expect that the job creation outlook would be substantially improved if we shift to public power.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Graham.
So I think the net effect, just in terms of if we municipalize the electric system, we'd probably have more jobs than we have now, simply because the Board of Waterworks doesn't have anybody that operates an electric system. They don't have any linemen, so all those people have to be brought on board. They're already working for Black Hills. So I don't think jobs would be lost in that. As Steve indicated, some of these jobs that have been outsourced to Rapid City or other places around the country instead of Pueblo would come back here to Pueblo in terms of customer service, collections, those kind of things. So, and I think, as I alluded to in my previous answer, that we'll be in a much better position as a community to offer companies that are interested in Pueblo some economic development rates on electricity, because if you have a business and energy is a big part of that business, Black Hills is not competitive. They are not competitive with the other communities on the Front Range that we compete with. And so I think if we municipalize this, and Black Hills doesn't have any friends on the PUC. When they go and try to get an economic development rate, the Public Utilities Commission said, no, we'll do that on a case-by-case basis. Well, in the case of AX2, it took more than 120 days from the time they started on an expedited basis to get an order, and by then, the company had evaporated. So you can't have those kind of delays when you're trying to make deals for economic development. And I think this will be in order to our benefit if we municipalize this process and have that local control.
Mr. Thurston, once again, I wish you had some backup here.
Oh, no, seriously,
with
if
the
I
county,
have a little bit more time, since I'm going to respond to both of them here, but, I'm just going to say with economic development, with companies that are looking at coming in, Pueblo is prime right now because Denver's priced out of the market, Springs, East Coast, West Coast, they have lots of issues. But they look at certain things. They look at the financial strength, the balance statement on a city. They want to know, what's the report card on the city? Is it an A plus because they're diligent with their revenue and the decisions they make? Well, right now, the city of Pueblo with its financial situation is a much bigger concern than anything that has to do with rates. And I'm saying that because last year, 5.9 million, we were in the red. We have enough money in reserves for maybe 2 or 3 more years like that, and we're out of reserves. We've never been in that situation before. They look at that. They get the newspaper. They read the newspaper for a year to see, is this a community friendly, or are they battling and fighting, and are they bashing everybody, and are they blaming, and all of this kind of stuff? Well, I'm sorry. That's an issue. The financial strength of the city is an issue. And then you have to have the right energy of being able to have a place for them to go. Well, right now, we have St. Charles development out there, and it's served by both San Isabel Electric and Black Hills. And again, when Vestas came in, we supported the fact that they're an alternate energy provider, and they're just going great. They chose Pueblo over anywhere in the world, and that was with the rates being not even being a factor. So I want to say that you look at Boulder, IBM right now, is talking about leaving Boulder. So what Steve, I mean, he can always say there's a place here, a place here. I could do the same the other direction. But I'm just saying, when you have an IBM that's looking at leaving, and they're going to his way of doing things, you know, but they're tired. It's a battle, it's a fight. How can they have dependability? How can they have consistency? How can they attract other people coming in when they're in litigation? When you have condemnation and you have litigation, I guarantee you, that is not conducive to people wanting to come in. And that's exactly what we're looking at doing for the next 7, 8, 10 years, to have that type of setting. We're going to miss the absolute prime time of growth and development if we decide we're going to play hardball and do condemnation. And it's up to the voters. If they want to be in litigation for that length of time, the mayor's talked about the gamble. If they're willing to gamble. People that are going to invest millions of dollars in a company, they don't go out to Vegas and say, we're going to roll the dice and see if we should come there or not. They make calculated decisions. And what is happening here is going to be a gamble, because all the uncertainties that we talked about. So I know the mayor's anxious to share something here, so.
Well, because I've never said this is a gamble.
You told me it was a gamble when we were at the library.
I did not tell you it was a
You
gamble.
said-
I might
you
have
said-
said there's
you-
risks involved, but I never said it was a gamble.
You said it was worth the gamble. No matter what, it's worth the gamble.
No, I didn't say it was a gamble.
Okay, Mr. Andrews, do you have another point to make on the effect on jobs and the economy locally?
I think I've said it.
Okay,
Let's move on.
about you? You good?
Yeah.
The last question is about governance. And Mayor, since you're the current elected official, we'll just start with you. If citizens in Pueblo vote for municipalization, what will happen to Black Hills customers who reside in Boone and Canyon City and Pueblo West? Do they get to vote on this? And what happens to their electric service?
Well, the short answer is no. Those customers do not get to vote on this, because this is a City of Pueblo franchise. So only the citizens who live within the city limits of the City of Pueblo get to vote on this. Now, will they be involved? Yes, because at the very least, I believe that the Board of Waterworks will look to acquire all of Black Hills electrical system in Pueblo County. So they'll be involved in that, because the City of Pueblo or the Board of Waterworks will be providing energy to those customers that Black Hills currently provides energy to with their Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. That'll be one of the assets that's taken by the Board of Waterworks. So what the Board of Waterworks has talked about is creating a regional distribution authority and a regional power authority. So those other communities that are getting energy from Black Hills now, if they want to join us and abandon their franchise with Black Hills and acquire their own distribution system, they could become members of these regional authorities, which would have a governing board from each of those entities that would help make decisions about how energy, how the distribution system would work and how the power supply would work. So that's it in a nutshell. But only the voters in the City of Pueblo will be allowed to vote on this.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Andrews?
Yes, it's serendipitous that the Canyon City has a franchise agreement with Black Hills Energy, as does any 20 entities between Rocky Ford to Cripple Creek to West Cliff and back. Lot of communities. Canyon City is the second largest franchise holder. Pueblo West would be larger, but it does not have a franchise agreement with Black Hills. So Canyon City has their franchise agreement expired in November of 2017, and they are in fact looking with great interest and following what's happening downriver here. Rather than introduce a franchise agreement that was updated, rather than introduce that to the voters and schedule a vote last year, they postponed it to see how Pueblo was going to move with respect to this upcoming vote on May 5th. So Canyon City, I can assure you, is very interested in what's going on down here. There is a group that's active in Canyon City and working with the elected officials to keep them informed, to ask probing questions, and to let them know that they are in support of what's going on down here, in particular in support of the mayor's plan, working with the Board of Waterworks to leave Black Hills Energy in favor of forming a public power utility.
Okay, Mr. Thurston,
You know,
same question.
I love the question here because I think it hits a lot, but I also, I'm going to throw something out for Steve to respond to when he gets a chance back. And now he talks about Canyon City, but the community that he actually lives in, because he's not even a Pueblo County resident, is not for the plan. He can't have them support it because they think it's a bad plan, and that's where he lives. I look at the situation in the actual ballot issue, and it says that the condemnation rights here in Pueblo can be expanded outside the limits, anywhere in Colorado. That's not legal for the city of Pueblo to condemn in Canyon City or in Ordway or whatever. And even if it was, guys, I'm going to finish, and you can have your shot at it here. You're creating bad neighbors. You're coming in and saying, we Pueblo, we know what we're doing, even though a lot of people in Pueblo have the same fear that we're going to make some major big mistakes that's going to come back. These communities aren't going to be supportive when their rates end up going higher because Pueblo pulls out. You're going to have lawsuits. You're going to have hold harmless agreements. You're going to have all of these things that are there, and there's no way the mayor can say that's not a possibility because it's a strong possibility. When I saw that in the ballot issue, that you can condemn outside anywhere location in the state of Colorado, I have never seen anything like that. I mean, I'd love to get an actual attorney that involves with this stuff that say that that's legal and you can do that, because how would we like to feel here in Pueblo if Canyon City came in and decided they want to condemn something in the city of Pueblo? I guarantee we'd be outraged. And even if they found a technicality to win that, you think that's going to create good neighbors with our neighbors? So when I see things in this ballot issue, which we'll get to at the end, I'm just appalled at the things that haven't been thought through and are put in here that put the citizens and the residents of Pueblo at major risk today, tomorrow, and in the future if this thing moves forward.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, they're not at major risk. The city of Pueblo indisputably has the ability to condemn assets outside the jurisdiction of the city of Pueblo that are necessary in order to deliver power to the citizens of the city of Pueblo. So I don't know where you got your legal advice from, Randy, when you say it's illegal for that to happen, but it's not illegal for that to happen. And that will play out if that's what has to happen. These other communities, they're not any happier with Black Hills than we are. And Randy says they're going to have to pay additional costs. Well, I think the Public Utilities Commission might have if these other communities have an opportunity to go with us and municipalize their distribution system and reduce their rates, and they decide, nah, we like being serviced by Black Hills for higher rates, I don't think the Public Utilities Commission is going to make the city of Pueblo pay for that if that's a choice those citizens made, that they want to stay with that company that's charging them the highest rates on the Front Range of Colorado. I just don't think that's what's going to happen.
I think we already decided that the rates aren't coming down. So I think you need to stop that conversation.
No, the rates are coming down.
When?
As
When?
soon as we pay for the, and it could be immediately if we pay for the, depending on what the price is that we
Okay.
have to pay for the assets.
So $1 billion added onto the bill for 20 years. When you're talking 20 or 25 years, you need to be straight with this.
We are being straight, and you've got the numbers. Take a look at the Board of Waterworks resolution that was passed 2 days ago, Randy. They set forth there specifically about how much debt capacity there is, where that excess money is to pay for it. It's posted now on my Facebook page. It's posted on the Board of Waterworks page. It'll show you specifically how it's going to be paid for, how much it'll cost, and how it's going to be paid for.
And
in
what-
specifics.
and what's the number that you're using, and what's the interest rate that you're using?
$868 million is the purchase price.
At what rate?
I think 5 or 6%. I
Okay.
think they're different percentages.
Okay.
It's a lower rate than Black Hills gets it at.
Well, and you're saying that then covers what is currently being charged, so there's no rate reduction in that.
If we have to pay that absolute top value.
Well, but that's not absolute top, because it could be 1.1 billion.
How could it be that when no appraiser said that?
Well, we haven't even started the process.
Of course we have. Black Hills hired an appraiser
You-
in their study.
What I'm saying is, you're talking that value will be determined down the road when all this litigation is
Right,
done.
right.
So there's no way you can say. So when you start making guarantees and promises, that's what I get upset over, because it is a gamble and there's unknowns.
Well, you say it's a gamble. It's not a gamble.
Okay,
There
so
are
it's not a
unknowns,
gamble.
certainly.
So if there's unknowns, then so what do you tell the grandma and grandpa that are expecting their rates to go down the day after this thing, and they find out that it's not going to happen for 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years, and then you still have a debt paid on top of that? They're going to be upset. People
Nobody
need to know.
expects the rates to go down immediately.
Well,
Nobody
but
expects that
that's not
except
true.
you.
No, When I'm out talking to people, they say, what we were told is we vote yes, our rates are going to go down as soon as we vote.
Well,
That's not true.
Of course it's not.
Well-
And we haven't told them that.
Well, you might not have told them that.
Nobody's told them
Nobody's
that.
told them that.
Okay,
Nobody's
well-
told them that.
well, I'm glad that you guys
That
can
may
so-
be the expectation, though, by some people, but I think that most reasonable people don't really expect everything to happen immediately. Do you have a final say on that, about what happens out to those other communities?
Yeah, a correction. I live in unincorporated Fremont County. Fremont County can't vote in the same way that unincorporated, or that Pueblo County outside of Pueblo can't vote. There are some communities, and I think there are a few downriver that can. So where I live in unincorporated Fremont County, I couldn't influence the vote one way or the other. When it comes to the condemning anywhere in the state of Colorado, let's be judicious here. That's not going to happen. The Black Hills Service Territory is from Rocky Ford to West Cliff to Cripple Creek. We're not dealing with the gas service territory, the 500,000 customers or so that Black Hills has. We're just dealing with these 96,000 meters. About a little over half of those are in Pueblo, and 2/3 or more are in Pueblo County. So that's the main focus of this, is Pueblo County first and foremost. And I believe at the end of the day, as the mayor described, if the deal is what we assume it would be, based on the 40 breakaways that have happened in the past, the deal is worth taking, then others in the service territory will want to join us.
Okay. Last question. Just tell me what you think we've missed, and I hope that somebody will tell us where we can find the wording of what's going to be on the ballot.
I have it right here.
Is it online somewhere? Where can we find it?
If you want to look at it.
I
I
want to show it to the people on Facebook. I want them
Okay.
to be able to
Yeah.
find it themselves. Do you have any idea?
Well, sure, it's on the city's website. You might have to look a little bit to get it now because it's probably in the council resolutions and minutes, but we can make arrangements to have that ballot language put right on the top there so that people
think
can
that
go
would be
there and
very
get
helpful
that,
for-
have a chance to look at it before. And we can pass, the whole ordinance. It's a lengthy ballot proposal, and the ballot
Okay.
language is lengthy as well.
Okay.
But it's a pretty simple concept.
Okay.
You want to terminate the franchise and set up a municipal utility. That's what you need to know about 2A.
Let's go ahead and, let's see, I think we started with him last time. Let's start with you this time. Whatever we've missed, whatever you want to say, 3 minutes.
The mayor just said something very interesting, and he said, that's all you need to know is this terminates the agreement early. Well, as I read this, I see twice where it becomes a blank check. There's no PUC protection. The tabor is removed. There's things that are involved with this that the only thing, and the mayor has said this to me, that if you're not happy with the rates, you wait till the guy comes up for election and then you elect somebody else. That's the only protection in there. You have without voter approval. You have located in the state of Colorado. It doesn't say in the service area. I mean, if what he's saying is true, then why doesn't the agreement say in the service area or in the county? I take this very serious when I see a ballot issue because obviously there's more behind the scenes of a strategy than there is, because if this was truly what the mayor was saying, the words would be totally different. So I then look at who has authority here. He kept saying, well, it's the Board of Waterworks, it's the Board of Waterworks, it's the Board of Waterworks. I like the Board of Waterworks, and I want to keep the Board of Waterworks strong and doing its deal. But down here at the bottom, it says, the City Council be authorized to adopt future ordinances and resolutions, and shall the Board of Waterworks of Pueblo authorized to adopt future resolutions, and shall the mayor be authorized to take future action necessary to appropriately carry out the requirements, purpose, and intent of this measure. So there's no protection for the citizens. Yes, this is government. They can paint it any way they want to, but the mayor has his hands in it, the city council has their hands in it, and the Board of Waterworks do. The fact is that 5 years from now, or when after the rates, the city takes over, you get a board in there that wants to do special favors for the marijuana industry. So as the mayor said, you can create a special district. You can't with PUC. PUC won't let you do that, and you can't charge over a certain rate. So all of a sudden, the marijuana industry, they get a 50% discount on their power. Well, guess what? 100% of whatever the costs are gets split by the ratepayers. So now the other ratepayers are paying a higher amount. That's not fair. If the mayor wants to protect and not make this a gamble, put in there like Boulder did. And here's what Boulder put in. Boulder said that and the citizens went with it, that the rates will remain the same or less once this takes over. They also put an amount in there that it would not exceed a certain amount. This could end up being $2 billion. Because once this is approved, it's out of the citizens' hands, and the citizens can't come and ever vote on this again. There's no reason for it to say without voter approval, and those you want to then, once you get control, do whatever you want, and the citizens are going to sit there and they're not going to be happy. But guess what? You have to wait till the board comes up for election and have it do it. That's not fair for the citizens of Pueblo to have this type of outrageousness in a ballot issue when they're sitting there talking about it's not a gamble. Why not put restrictions in there? Why not put controls? Why not put the things that you say is so clear for you? Why not put that in the agreement, Mayor?
Because that would repeat the mistakes that Boulder made, and it would drag it out like you want to drag it out, Randy. That's why we're avoiding those mistakes.
So you're
Okay, we're getting a
sacrificing.
little muddled we're
okay.
confusing the timers here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
How
Sorry.
much more do they have there? Is he good? Okay, all right. You're
All right.
next. All right.
So, you know why the Board of Waterworks? Because they're a 5-member independently elected board by the citizens of this community. When was the last time you got to vote for the Board of Directors of Black Hills Corporation? When was the last time you got to do that? When was the last time you got to vote for a member of the Public Utilities Commission? You never get to do that. Here you have direct control over the people who are going to set your rates. And how much better can it get than that? If you don't like what
bad.
they've done, you elect somebody else to do it. It's that local control that is very, very important. Randy talks about the PUC regulation. The PUC allowed Black Hills Energy to set the highest rates on the Front Range for the city of Pueblo. But for the fact that we had a commissioner from the city of Pueblo, they would have got it more than what they have now. But for that simple fact. So the PUC has a control. Let me give you just a short example. They allowed Black Hills to gamble. $31 million of our money hedging on the price of natural gas. And Black Hill, in their usual style, they guessed wrong. They must have bought contracts that the price of natural gas was going to go up, but it cost us over the last 5 or 6 years $31 million in those gambles that they made in the futures market. The PUC in 2016, 2017, Black Hills Energy filed documents with the Public Utilities Commission indicating this is what their financial situation was. In each of those years, they made significant mistakes, totaling about $30 million that were filed with the PUC. Nobody at the PUC looked at it. They overstated their profit by $30 million, and Black Hills didn't even realize it until we were at the bargaining table with them, and I started talking about the money they were taking out of this community, and they said that wasn't the case. So in July of last year, they went back and filed amendments to those documents that they did 2 years or 3 years previously. So don't think that the PUC is looking out for us. The only people that are going to look out for us is us, and the way we do that is by electing those members. Randy, the final point I want to make, I don't know whether you're a member of Pueblo Cares.
I'm not.
Okay, you're not, okay.
I don't-
Pueblo Cares organization set up by Black Hills Energy, their vice president here. They've been running ads since last December, I think. They have now established Pueblo Cares Issue Committee. And Pueblo Cares says we're not an issue committee, we don't have to disclose our donors. But Pueblo Cares donated $700,000 to Pueblo Cares Issue Committee. And I asked Vance Crocker yesterday or the day before, you want to tell us where Pueblo Cares got that $700,000 to donate to Pueblo Cares Issue Committee? Do you know where they got that $700,000?
I have no idea. I'm not involved with
You're
that.
not involved with Pueblo Cares?
No, not at all.
Okay. So
I'm
I
a
just think
concerned
the people of Pueblo, people are going to try to confuse you. It's a pretty simple issue. Do you want to terminate the franchise and set up a municipal utility? Don't listen to any of this stuff about all these unknowns, or it's a gamble or it's a risk. We're a strong community. We can do this complicated project. The Board of Waterworks is used to these complicated projects, and we can make this succeed if we want to.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, you get the last word on this.
Okay, I'll read something that I prepared as a final remark.
Are we doing final remarks yet, or?
Yeah, that was kind of it.
This is
Okay,
it.
Are you good?
A
I've got some
number,
final remarks, too.
a number of large commercial and manufacturing businesses are frustrated and held back by Black Hill's high rates. Consider the following statements by Dr. Malik Hassan, owner of New View Pharma, regarding the impact of high electric rates on his business. Quote, Pueblo is the poorest major city in the state, and yet we have the highest electric rates. How would you ever attract a technology company to move here? If Pueblo was not my hometown, there is no way I would have put my facility here. I would have been much better off putting it in Denver. So you do it because it's your hometown. Frankly, I sometimes regret it because I'm at a serious competitive disadvantage because of the high price of power. End quote. Utility operations are large and involves long time frames. Utilities, especially water utilities, think in terms of decades. The Pueblo Water Board is used to supervising large and long-term projects and infrastructure investments. I trust that they will have the ability to supervise the operations of partners in the electric utility operations and maintenance sector. Those partners will do a good job of both keeping the lights on and of buying wholesale power at rates lower than they would have otherwise. In the spirit of trust but verify, I'll verify too. I plan to attend some water board meetings to confirm my assumption that citizen input to the process will be considered at the highest level. On May 5th, I encourage your listeners to vote for ballot question 2A. Doing so will bring to Pueblo the power to decide the long-term future of our electricity system. I urge you to see a vote for 2A as a vote for a more positive future for Pueblo, for your kids and your grandkids. Public power should bring us local control, lower cost per month for customers, state-of-the-art rate design for all customer classes, the power to choose our sources of power generation, the ability to set fair policies for our most disadvantaged residents, and reliable power, since public power nationwide is more reliable than investor-owned utilities. I'll conclude with a quote from experience. Consider the case of Winter Park, Florida, where the city voted in 2005 to break away from its investor-owned utility. Originally, Commissioner Barbara Devane was against the idea. Eventually, she supported it. At the 10-year anniversary celebration of choosing public power, she said, quote, "It was the best thing the city has ever done. I'm glad we took it on." Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I think I'm going to let you go next and just finish with finishing remarks if you prepared some, and then we'll let him finish because.
Yeah, I didn't prepare any finishing remarks, as I indicated. I spent the first year of my administration trying to make a deal with Black Hills Energy that would avoid this election for municipalization, including such things as, you know, why don't you agree to sell us your assets at the end of the franchise and we'll just not have to do it now. We'll just wait until the franchise is over. No consideration at all. They've taken the position that they're not for sale, and that's their right. They have a right to do that, just as the city of Pueblo has the right to exercise our option to purchase their assets under the Colorado Constitution, the Colorado statutes, and the franchise agreement. So this is not like a typical real estate transaction where the seller has unrealistic expectations and appraisal comes in and the deal falls apart. Here, what happens is this unrealistic seller is going to have to take the appraised price that's determined by the courts. So this is not going to be some out-of-control, willy-nilly, you know, a wild man's going to determine the price of this asset that the city of Pueblo is going to acquire. As I indicated earlier, this is going to be determined by a Pueblo judge and a Pueblo jury after getting appraisals from both Black Hills Energy and from the Board of Waterworks about what the value of those assets are. And that's, you know, obviously opinions, but if you can't reach an agreement about what the sales price is, that's what happens all the time, is appraisals are done and a judge or a jury will make that determination. So this is not the kind of thing where the sky's going to be the limit and we're going to have to pay whatever Black Hills wants. That's not the case at all. The best evidence we have with respect to the value is in the Phase 2 study that used the highest possible value for Black Hills assets in reaching a determination. And using those highest possible values, this transaction is very, very feasible for the city of Pueblo. So I encourage you to vote yes for 2A, vote for 2A.
Thank you. Mr. Thurston, you get the last word
All
here.
right, thank you. The citizens are confused. The citizens want to do the right thing. They just want to know. It's good to have this dialogue on two sides because I'm not making the mayor wrong in what he's saying, but I'm just saying that there's not everybody that shares that feeling of that it's worth the risk. The city is not qualified to operate, maintain, and upgrade a $1 billion utility. It's not. I commend the Board of Waterworks. I commend them. They've done a great job, but a Board of Waterworks deals with water. It's like having a brain surgeon do heart surgery. They're both professionals in what they do, but you can't cross over. The utility is very complicated. Then you throw in the dynamics of it being a network. Then you throw in the dynamics of doing a condemnation. When I was on council, we condemned properties twice in 8 years, and I hated it both times because it's not what you want to do. You don't want to create that energy. Looking at the financial state of the city, to operate, you better have some deep pockets. The Board of Waterworks has $22 million in reserves, and they've got a ranch that's worth $10 million that they're going to sell. You already look at Boulder at getting up to the $30 million number, and they're not there yet. So you can say all day long, it's not the same. Well, it is the same. There's unknowns. The people of Boulder sought the same thing. There's no risk in this. The courts are going to agree with us. There's no problem. Well, you get good attorneys on both sides that cost a lot of money, and it's not that simple. I mean, Mr. Gradisar, you're an attorney. 2 or 3 more years with the state of the city, the reserve will be gone. The Board of Waterworks with their reserve isn't something that really needs to be looked at in that this is a solid situation. I look at the streets of the city, I look at the animal shelter, I look at, well, Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan is you know about Flint?
What's that got to do with this?
Well, I'm just going back with this, that this was a city-owned utility, water. They didn't have the financial strength to make it work. Now it's over and done with. They have to have bottled water because they don't have the financial ability. Nobody's moving into Flint, Michigan. We don't need to be a Flint, Michigan. We don't have the strength. And again, and Mr. Mayor, I didn't laugh when you were talking.
Well,
but no.
but that's
you can pick and
okay.
choose what you want to focus on, and I have an equal vote to say something out there and let people make a decision. My not wanting to support a municipal government has to do with the enterprise, the last enterprise. You know when the last city enterprise took place was in 2009. And it was to make it the PMI, a city enterprise. Vera Ortegon said it's going to cost the taxpayers $0. She was just as sure as the mayor is sitting here saying, this is a good deal, don't worry about it, trust us. She said $0. Well, 2 years later, they pulled a plug on it at the cost of $3 million. So when I am saying things, this is not as clean as it is. People need to make a decision. Rates are not going to come down. So if you're going to think, if you vote yes, your rates are going to come down, they're not. So I'll go ahead and end on that note because, Ruth, I appreciate your patience on this. But people need to know this could go on for probably for another hour.
Sure.
Because the people out there listening, they're grabbing onto every word that the mayor's saying, every word that I'm saying is what's real, what's true, what's not. And I'm just saying, please do your research. And if you don't know, you don't understand the ballot, you don't understand the facts, vote no. If you know everything, you read the ballot and you say, oh, this is great. There's no protections, there's no caps, but it's okay because we trust the mayor, then do what you want to. But at least vote no until you know.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Pueblo, thank all 3 of you for being here tonight. I think that'll conclude this presentation.
Ruth, thank you.
Thank you.